Was it? Okay.
Yes.
That would be a first. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We heard what I think was a very effective and powerful speech last night from the President of the United States. I thought it was really, really effective, both in terms of tone and then in terms of substance. And I think he highlighted some of the accomplishments that we've had working with him, Republican House, Republican Senate, and the majorities, and was able to go through some of the things that we've done, from securing the border to providing monumental, historic tax relief to the American people, and to making sure that our national security interests are met so that we can maintain a safe country. And obviously a lot of his focus was on safer streets, more money in your pocket, and new opportunities to get ahead for working families. So good evening, but obviously a lot more to do, and he actually laid out sort of an agenda which we look forward to working on. One of the things that will be immediately on that agenda is a housing bill, which gets at the heart of the affordability issue, particularly for younger Americans. And we've got a bill that's out of the Senate Banking Committee that we hope to get teed up for consideration. We'll try and get on that this week, or at least set up a vote to get on it next week. And I think that would be a very substantial issue that we can deal with. I also think that the issue of energy is a big factor in the cost of everything. We're talking about the affordability issue, and we've got some ideas and proposals to deal with that. I think technology and innovation is also something. Artificial intelligence, I think there's a path forward perhaps on some legislation to deal with that. We just heard from some folks who are experts in that field. But there's just a lot of work to do. And obviously our focus, as I said, is going to be safer streets, more money in people's pockets, and new opportunities for working families to get ahead. And those are the things that in the next few weeks and months that we'll be focused on. But and we would hope at least that there would be some Democrats who would be willing to work with us. These are not partisan issues, nor is the issue of dealing with waste, fraud, and abuse in our government. That's also something I think that is a real opportunity for us to address, and all of those ought to have bipartisan support. These are not partisan issues, and I'm hoping that there are some Democrats who want to do what is in the best interest of the American people, and get away from kind of what we saw last week, which was essentially sort of two Americas when you observed what was happening in that chamber and the way the Democrats were reacting to what the president had to say. Whoever the president is, Democrat or Republican, you ought to have people who want to do what's in the best interest of the American people, and I hope there's still some Democrats around who want to do that. Questions?
Leader, based on what you heard at the briefing yesterday, do you think Iran represents an imminent threat to U.S. national security? Do you support limited strikes, or would you support boots on the ground if necessary for regime change?
Well, I'm listening, as I think, and observing, obviously, to the descriptions of the circumstances on the ground. I think you've seen significant accumulation of assets in that region, and I think that is in response to a belief that there is a national security interest involved here when it comes to not only our homeland but also a lot of our allies in the region. And I think that the president, I don't know that he's made any decisions about this, but I think that he is preparing for contingencies and is pursuing his policy of peace through strength and working with allies in the region to ensure that we prevent Iran from ever having a nuclear capability. But they also have a lot of conventional capabilities that represent a threat, certainly to the neighborhood and to a lot of our allies. So I think working through that, but I don't have anything more to report on that.
What did you make of some of the behavior from Democrats in the chamber last night, refusing to stand at some point, some of the outbursts?
I thought it was I was like watching two Americas. I was watching a celebration of the both men's and women's Olympic team gold medals, celebrating people in the audience, one of whom was a South Dakota guy who's lived 100 years and a decorated fighter pilot, and just watching the Democrats. I think you saw there a party that is for open borders, a party that's for sanctuary cities, a party that is basically pro-defund law enforcement, a party that's for higher taxes and more government and more regulations and less American energy. I mean, I think, and so those were the issues the president addressed, and clearly I think you saw in the chamber us as Republicans expressing support for that. But that contrast when he asked the question and asked people to stand up and every Democrat was seated. I don't know how you explain that, but we are living literally in two Americas. And the president's agenda is the one that is going to build on the successes of the past, which he talked about, our heritage, our belief in freedom, and creating more opportunities for the future for the American people, whether that's on the economic front, whether, as I said, it's safer streets, and just new opportunities for working Americans to get ahead. That's what this president's focused on, and the Democrats couldn't be farther from that objective.
Leader Thune, on the SAVE Act, you said on Fox earlier that you were going to wait until the government was reopened, DHS funding was restored before you voted on that. Is that the case? And then also, what is your message to the Republicans in your conference who are pushing over and over again that you can do this with the talking filibuster?
Well, there are a couple things about that. One is, once we get on, if we were to go down that path, it's very hard to pivot and get back to open up the government. I frankly think we ought to. We need to make sure that DHS, TSA, Coast Guard, FEMA, all those agencies are funded. And so I'm hopeful there will be a breakthrough on that. That's going to require some, obviously cooperation from the Democrats, which we haven't seen a lot of so far. But we want to get to the SAVE Act. We also, as I mentioned, we've got a housing bill that we can pivot back and forth to if we get a deal to open up the government. That's harder to do once you're in the throes of a talking filibuster. The talking filibuster issue is one on which there is not certainly a unified Republican conference, and there would have to be. If you go down that path, you're talking about the need to table what are going to be numerous amendments, and an ability to keep 50 Republicans unified pretty much on every single vote. And there isn't support for doing that at this point. As I've said, and we will get on it, and we will have a vote on the SAVE Act. The context of that, the process in which we consider it is still an open question, but one that we're having conversations about, but clearly not a unified position, at least among Republicans in the Senate.
But it sounds like that vote might be subject to a 60-vote threshold. Is that what you're saying?
I think that's obviously a very real possibility.
Leader Thune, on tariffs specifically, the president last night said that he believes he can continue the current 15% tariffs without Congress. Are you concerned that runs afoul of Article 2?
I think there's authority that the president has, and there are statutes that have delegated certain trade authorities, tariff authorities, to the president, and which they're exploring. 232, 301, those have been used in the past. This particular one, which was ruled unconstitutional by the court, is one that they had seized upon to implement some of the tariffs that are currently underway. The ones you're talking about, I think, are temporary and would have to be at some point reauthorized or re-upped. So we'll see. I mean, at this point, I think there's some open questions around the tariff issue. Clearly the court's decision complicated it, but I think there are other authorities the president can use, and I think the administration is exploring those right now.
Does Congress need to reassert itself, though?
Well, I mean, I think, the Article 1, Congress has when it comes to taxes, trade, or tariffs and duties and things like that, yes. But as I've said, historically, there are examples where Congress has delegated some of that authority through statute to the executive branch. And I think most of us agree that the president can use, and it is a tool, that can be used to achieve better trade deals, to develop reciprocity with countries that haven't been treating us fairly, to achieve national security objectives. I think there's some fairly broad authority too there constitutionally, but I think what you'll see them doing is exploring the specific statutory authorities that Congress has delegated to the Article 2 branch of the government, to the administration through the years.
Leader Thune, do you think that the Trump administration can or should pay TSA workers during the shutdown? Obviously, they tried to find ways to do that for defense during the last shutdown. What do you think about that?
I think anything you can do to keep people employed. Government shutdowns nobody wins, and you've heard me say that many times. This is an example, really, that we ought to be able to figure this out. We had a deal, and that deal has now been voted down twice on the floor of the Senate by the Democrats. And so the White House, I think, has been in good faith trying to come to the table and work out some of the differences that the Democrats have, but in ways that don't jeopardize or undermine the ability of our law enforcement officials to do their jobs and to do them in a way that keeps them safe. So it's a ongoing conversation. But to your question, if they can figure out a way to pay government employees, absolutely. I mean, these are people who have jobs and have commitments and have families, and you know, it's going to be really unfortunate if we get to a point where, and I hope we don't, where people aren't getting paid because the Democrats continue to insist on changes to things that are just not going to be feasible or tenable if you want to have law enforcement in this country with the ability to be able to do their jobs. Thank you.
Leader, do you